Welcome back to WCB, World Cinema Breakdown. And today I'd like to present to you a new video about a movie called Jersey. And it's a 2019 Telugu movie. I'm sure some of you have heard of it. If not, well, the reason I'm doing this video is because I've been looking forward to watching the upcoming Hindi movie called Jersey, which stars Shahid. And it's a remake of the Telugu movie from 2019 by Gautam Tinanuri. And before I watched the Hindi version, I really wanted to watch the original because, why does a remake even happen? Well, I'm sure the original content must have been so good that they decided that it's a story that's worth telling to broader audiences, and so they're making a remake. So before I watched the Shahid version, I also wanted to watch the original version that stars Nani. So here we are. And before I dive into some of the actors' names or directors or things like that, of that nature, let's just go ahead and let's just watch the trailer, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Very classic cricket shot. Almost reminds me a little bit of Dhoni, the movie Dhoni. So there's clearly a bit of a love story angle as well. Mm, 10 years can change a person quite a bit. I wonder what happened in these 10 years to where he went from a potential cricket star to not even having enough money. Oh, wow. He was stealing from his own wife. Things have to be bad if you're going that low. Wait, is that? That looked like Katappa.
He's bloody 36 years old. ఇప్పుడు మనం సెలెక్ట్ చేసిన ఏం ఉపయోగం ఉంటుంది?
Okay, so it's a coming back type of story, redemption story. It's a cute child.
Like for the first time. He was cops. ఏం చేయమన్నా చేస్తాను సార్ కానీ మళ్ళీ తల్లించుకోలేదు.
I like the trailer is building up a lot of drama and tension. Clearly his child is one of his greatest motivations. Excellent. Okay, wow. There's in terms of the trailer, there's not too much to touch on because it almost seems like a very, I don't want to say predictable, but a bit of a predictable story. I think he was in his 20s or something before, and he was thriving as a cricketer, and obviously something happened, and 10 years later, he's not him anymore, and he wants to get back to that. And I'm sure a lot of people probably relate to this type of a story, which is probably why a lot of people connected with it to begin with, and it's being retold to a different set of audience. But I'm very excited to actually watch the movie, and instead of delaying it, let's just get right into it. See you guys on the other side. I will see you. Bye-bye. Whoop, and I'm back. You guessed it. I just saw the movie, and I was thoroughly impressed, I must say. It had its flaws, but I was impressed overall. But before I dive into more details, I just want to clarify that from now on, for every single video I put out, I'm going to have a section which is spoiler-free, so you can still enjoy most of the video without having seen the movie, and then a spoiler section, and I'll make it very clear on the screen when the spoiler section begins. And diving into the non-spoiler aspects, some of the things I can probably touch on are the message, which I just briefly mentioned, the directing, as well as the acting, but then some more specific scenes or certain moments that really touched me, or some of the flaws that I noticed. I'm going to leave that for the spoiler section. So diving right into the directing, as I mentioned before, this is directed by Mr. Gautam Tinanuri, and it's fascinating that just like Bad Genius, the director of this movie is also the writer of this movie, and as I mentioned in that previous video, I always love it when the person who's written the story is also either directing or producing it, because it shows the passion they have for telling the story and getting it out to the audience. And that passion was clear because throughout the entire movie, the message of it's never too late, you can always come back, you can always fulfill your dreams, was pretty evident throughout, and it was not subtle at all. And as a matter of fact, since we're talking about sports, let's use sports examples. LeBron James, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, he's 36 years of age. Okay, what about football? American football. Tom Brady's 44 years of age and he just won a Super Bowl and he's still playing at his best level. And let's see, cricket. I mean, I'm sure most of you would relate to cricket, so let's think about cricket for a second. We all know Dhoni. We all love Dhoni. Do you know how old that man is? He's 40 years of age, and while he has given up, international cricket, he's still playing in the IPL, and he's still playing really good cricket at the age of 40. So clearly, it's not too late. And, while this movie was touching more so on sports and not giving up your dreams, I think this applies to all facets of life. There's no need to think, oh no, I'm 36 years of age, like the main character in the story was, or, whatever, however old you are, there's no reason to give up. Because most things in life, it's just we hold ourselves back, giving excuses to ourselves, when in reality, it's just a matter of going out there and just doing it the way this character, basically did. And will there be obstacles? Of course. Will there be hurdles? Yes. As you saw the main character of this movie, Arjun, go through, and that's just going to happen in life, and that's just a part of life. You can't have everything easy, but that's okay, But beyond the message itself, which, as I said, you could probably gather just from the trailer itself and not even watching the movie, let's focus a little bit more on the acting aspect. So this was my first ever time watching a movie which stars Nani, and of course he's a big star. And I was thoroughly impressed because while this wasn't a spectacular performance, I still think he himself carried the movie, because most characters within the movie were relatively typical or cliche, but I think the way he carried himself and the way he went through the entire story and just lived it, so to speak, I think that draws your attention throughout the entire story. But besides him, actually, before I move on to another character whose acting I really enjoyed, I think the choice of choosing Shahid Kapoor for the Hindi remake of this is excellent, because I think there's very few actors who could probably redo this role and that who do it justice and maybe even do it better. I think in that list of people that could probably do that, I think Shahid is one of them. And in the last few years, he's been doing excellent work and only getting better. And I think this is going to be another movie where he shows his acting chops, so to speak. But moving on, a great surprise, as you even probably noticed in the trailer, was I noticed that Katappa was in this. And, I'm sorry for referring to Mr. Sathyaraj as Katappa, because for me, he'll always be Katappa from Bahubali. But it was great to see, Mr. Sathyaraj in another role besides Katappa, because that was such a different role, and this is such a different role. He was one of the main coaches that believes and supports Arjun throughout his journey. And like I said, it was so vastly different from Katappa that it was just fascinating to see just the different shades of his acting. And overall, I think these two were probably the standout performances. But besides that, there were minor roles here and there that could have used improvement, or maybe there just wasn't as much meat to. But in terms of acting, I think these two really stood out the most. Now, I'm going to be transitioning to the spoiler part of the review. So just a fair warning, if you haven't seen the movie, please hit pause, go watch the movie, come back, watch the rest of the review. But I'm going to dive a little bit more into the story itself with specific scenes. So I repeat, if you haven't seen the movie, please stop right now and come back. But continuing on with the story, and more so the spoiler stuff, I jotted down a few scenes that really stood out to me, whether they were emotional or I think they were important for the story, whatever the reason is. And the first scene that that really stood out to me in the entire movie was the scene where his coach tells him that there's a charity match coming up and I want you to play. And of course, initially he refuses, but then he's able to be convinced because of a potential 1,000 rupees. And he goes home and he opens up his kit and he grabs the bat. And the way he holds that bat, the way he holds on to that bat, and the look of happiness and content you see in his eyes, we haven't seen that look in the entirety of the movie since he's given up cricket. So that scene really stood out to me because it shows you what he's been missing for the last 10 years of his life. And as someone who's so passionate about something, it's difficult to just give it up. And of course, to this point in the movie, we still don't know why he's given up, but we just know that he's given it up, and clearly it is literally his life. And I understand the movie's portraying that in a good way, but obviously it can also be taken in a bad way, because you don't want something to eat you up so much in your own life that you're not able to fulfill the rest of your duties or just continue to thrive as a person, because he wasn't able to give his full attention to his wife and kids. He wasn't able to just truly move on. And sometimes in life, you have to move on. Though, of course, I do appreciate the message that do not give up. It's just, sometimes it can definitely go overboard, because even if you talk to some of the greatest basketball players or soccer players, they understand that at the end of the day, basketball, soccer, whatever, this it's a game. It's not their entire life. It should not be the entire breed of their existence, because once they retire, or once they stop starting, once they stop playing that game, they still have a life outside of that game. They have a family, they have friends, they have other passions. But still, that scene just stood out to me because that was probably the first time we saw him being content. And honestly, it was foreshadowing, because, cricket is what makes him happy, and that's what he continues on and eventually does. But going to the charity match itself, I really, really liked the fact that it wasn't so like happy at the end of the day, where he just comes out of nowhere, hasn't played with a team in the past, and just magically wins them a game. I mean, of course, he had an excellent performance, which is why he was even noticed to begin with, but he didn't win the game. And I like that, because there has to be some level of adversity. Otherwise, it's like, what am I watching? Am I just watching a superhero who's just great at great at everything? Obviously not. And I appreciated the fact that that wasn't the case. And speaking of adversity, it's good to see a hero, whether it's in this case a cricketer, or whomever it is, the main protagonist, go through these pitfalls, go through these challenges, but also have flaws. Because in reality, nobody is just a perfect person, and we clearly saw flaws in him as a person, as a father, as a husband at times, and especially when he's so upset with himself that he can't even buy his son a 500 rupee jersey, that he stoops so low to steal from his own wife. And that scene, I think, was meaningful, because that was a slap in the face, literally and metaphorically, no pun intended. That slap in the face was necessary, because it woke him up. It made him feel ashamed of who he was, and sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need that to just realize, what am I doing? I just need to sit down and think about what I'm doing, and that's the moment that it led to for him, because of that slap. Especially when he realized that his own son lied about being slapped by his father that loves him so much. I think that also really woke him up, that what am I doing? I'm hurting those around me because of my own pitfalls. But moving on, another scene while this was mostly a serious movie, or meant to be a serious movie, there were a few moments of comedic relief here and there. But something that I found interesting, which wasn't even meant to be a comedic scene, I just laughed at, was a scene where the two coaches are discussing if he should be part of the Ranji team going forward. When the Karnataka coach and Mumbai coach are talking, and the Mumbai coach immediately says there's no way, he's too old, he's 36 years of age, we can get somebody younger on the team. But the Karnataka coach pushes him, and the tactic he uses to convince him is, he mentions a dialogue of an Indian actor, Rajesh Khanna, and that just brought a smile to my face, that Indians are so emotional, that instead of using logic that, oh, this man is so talented, I've just given you so many stats as to why he's one of the best batsmen in the country, what eventually convinces that coach is emotion, and just a dialogue that most of us probably relate to. And whether you've seen that movie of Rajesh Khanna or not, you'll still relate to that. And it just further shows you how emotional Indians can be. And as a matter of fact, this whole movie was more driven by emotion than anything, which is fine. But it was just interesting, because that moment kind of signifies Indian culture in the way that this movie really was. But moving on to a few of the more serious scenes, one scene that I understand why it was there, but just as an audience, I just was unhappy with, was when his wife, things are finally going well for him, and she comes to him, sits down at a cafe, and tells him, my father is willing to pay 50,000 rupees, blah, blah, blah. And then she asks him to come back to normal life, just a normal, happy life, and just give up cricket. And the phrase normal life or normal happy life was just fascinating because for him normal life is not sitting at home doing something he hates, and pretending to put on a face of joy, of happiness just to appease his family. For him, happy life, normal life is doing what he was currently doing, which was cricket. And I understand it's hard to give your family some time if you're that dedicated towards, something like cricket, but a lot of people are able to do that, and she clearly could not realize that. And she was a bit blinded by everything that had happened in the last 10 years. And while I do understand why that was there, it was just infuriating because you would expect his wife to be the only supporter, and he even said that I can handle this from everybody else. In my whole life I've been told I can't do something, but when she said you cannot do this, I don't believe in you, that hurts. That hurts, especially when that's the one person whose opinion matters to you. But obviously their relationship goes through a lot of turmoil, and eventually they do understand each other, which is just how life is. Nothing's always going to be happy. There will be ups and downs. But beyond beyond the obvious scenes, some of the ones which I mentioned, one last scene I just want to touch on, which really draws at you emotionally, is the scene where which is a scene where his child, he opens his cupboard and you see that his dad's poster or his dad's newspaper clipping is pasted onto like the cupboard post. The poster is pasted onto the cupboard, and that was so emotional because of the fact that his whole life, Nani, or the main character, he has just tried to be a good father and embody what a good father is meant to be, so that his child can look up to him. And he's failed. In his eyes, he's failed at least. But this is the first time where he sees his son. His son is so proud of him. I mean, of course, he's such an innocent little child. He doesn't understand what the meaning of success or failure is. But this is the first time that Nani is looking at himself or at something he is doing as success, as seen by the way he gets so happy and asks his child, "Do you want me to play cricket?" And I think that moment was very meaningful, similar to the slap in the face, because these are the different motivations we have as humans, whether it's self-respect or the admiration and support of others. And I think that moment was very necessary for him to kind of see, why am I even doing this in the first place? I'm doing this for my son. I mean, of course, he's not obviously doing it for himself as well, but there's just an extra added motivation. And I think his son throughout the movie served as that motivation. And that was just a touching scene. And one final scene I want to talk about, which was obviously very in your face, this callback from the entire movie, was when at the end of the movie, his son, when he's all grown up, he's provided an Indian jersey. So 22 years later, he finally gets the jersey that he'd wanted. So that was a great callback, just a great great moment, wholesome moment overall, I would say. But getting past all these scenes, I just want to mention a few flaws I think I noticed in the movie, which are expected sometimes with these type of movies, but it's okay. Is that it was so predictable. I mean, once you see the trailer, you kind of honestly already know what the entire story is. And a lot of the scenes were cliche, or some of the characters were cliche. I mean, of course, the ending, his heart condition was not really cliche thing, so that was great. But still, overall, it was still a predictable story. But that shouldn't take away from how good of a watch it was. But one last thing, which I think I already briefly touched on, is that while it is important to chase your passions, which the movie kind of pushes, it's also important to balance things out, because this man knowingly gave up his life just to potentially be on the Indian team, which he did eventually get selected on the Indian team. But was it worth it? Because he knew he had that heart condition. He knew if he put too much stress, he might die, which obviously he did. But was all of that worth it with respect to your family? I mean, he loved his family so much, but he left them behind because of this game. Was it worth it? Now, that's a question I'm sure we all have different answers to. But I think that there is a point to where your passions do need to be fulfilled, but also not at the cost of your own life, or at the cost of you not being able to spend time with your family forever. But still, overall, I think if those 2 or 3 minor things can be ignored, I think overall it was a great watch. And especially from an emotional standpoint, most people will love the movie from start to finish, because it does tug at your heartstrings oftentimes, and mainly through his relationships with his wife and his son, and I mean, of course, his the connection between him and his coach as well. That was just a great, great relationship, the father son, father figure sort of relationship, as a matter of fact. But overall, I think it was a great movie, and considering the minor flaws I did mention, I think I would like to give this overall an 8 out of 10, and I think everyone should watch this movie. And I would say, maybe watch this even before you see the Hindi version, or maybe watch it after you see the Hindi version, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of great moments to compare and just look at how Shahid did the role, or how some of the other main characters did the role, and compared to Nani's character or Satyaraj's character, and just I'm sure there's so much more to it. But overall, I would just like to thank everyone for sitting through this review, and hopefully you watch the movie. And if not, maybe you just got something out of this video regardless. But lastly, just thank you so much for being here again, and I hope you like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be signing off. Thank you. See you guys on the next video. Bye-bye.